Hedge fund manager David Einhorn of Greenlight Capital with us for the entire hour. He's the author of Fooling Some of the People All of the Time, a long, short story. And we've been talking for the past 15 minutes about Lehman Brothers, his short position, and the future of that brokerage firm. We love having you on because of your position, you have influence. And what you've said has helped arguably to move the stock. Obviously, with that comes a lot of scrutiny. It happened in the Times yesterday. People talking more about your involvement with New Century, that you somehow missed the subprime crisis, and the timing of your TV appearances, of your media appearances, which you didn't do a lot of prior to this, coincident with the publishing of your book. How do you react to those criticisms?
All right. I think a bunch of things. I think that no one's going to listen to David Einhorn because I'm David Einhorn. People are only going to listen to me if I say something that's sensible. If I say something that they think is not sensible, they'll probably do the opposite. They'll probably say, oh, this guy thinks this and he's positioned this way and he's not making any sense. So they'll do the opposite. So I don't think anybody does anything because it's David Einhorn who's saying it. It's because of the quality of what it is said, just like any other person. If a research analyst writes something, some people say that's junk and they ignore it. And if they have a good call that actually adds information to the market, then sometimes people react to it. So I think that's the first point. The second, I think the New Century thing, it's kind of funny to bring it right on along here, because the history we have with subprime mortgages is that in 1998 we owned a very large subprime mortgage company. We were large shareholders of a company called BNC Mortgage. And what happened to BNC Mortgage? Lehman bought it. And they took it over in 1998 or 1999, and they made it a much bigger part of Lehman, the originator of subprime mortgages. Now, we continued, bought New Century, and eventually by about 2004, 2005, we bought this like 2001, 2002, and the investment worked well for a while. We began to see some problems. And I made a mistake. And the mistake I made was when I saw the problems, I thought I could go in and try to help fix it and how to try to get better. So I tried to get myself on the board and clean up some of the stuff that I saw that was going on there and reduce the risk at the company. But the reality, unfortunately, was that I was too late, and what I would have been much better off doing is having sold the stock. So, but the point they're making in the Times is that we're sometimes wrong, and I think that's true for everybody.
So you made comments at the time about New Century that you believed to be true at the time, that eventually, like everybody in subprime, things...
Right. The difference was we had about 4% of our assets, of our equity, tangible equity, if you would, in New Century. And when it went down, we marked it down in real time. And by the end of the first quarter of last year, that loss was taken on our books. If you compare that to, say, Lehman, just because that's the topic of the day, they've originated lots and lots of Alt-A and subprime mortgages, and right now today they're sitting with $13 billion of whole loan Alt-A's on their books. It's just one of many exposures that they have, and that by itself represents about 70% of their tangible common equity.
What did your hedge fund do in the year that you took the losses on New Century?
We made about 10% because, among other things, we were short some things that did well, and some of our other long-term.
And then long-term, your record, what we had it last time, what was that unbelievable
ridiculous number?
I think we said it was it's in the book, 25% after fees net for 12 years.
What do you tell a Lehman shareholder? We were saying, you know, if a Lehman shareholders were here, there would be a riot right about now, and they'd be trying to wring your neck. Mm-hmm. I assume, and I don't know, I assume they're calling the SEC, trying to subpoena you, trying to find out all sorts of things. How do you deal with that? And actually, I should ask, you know, has anyone subpoenaed you relative to the Lehman situation?
Yeah, if a Lehman shareholder was here and we were talking with the Lehman shareholder, I would want to discuss it with them. You disagree, you're long. Do you think I have something wrong here? If I have something wrong here, tell me what it is. If you think it doesn't matter what I'm saying because there's other good things going on, tell me what those are.
You think you've been fairly treated by Lehman Brothers?
Yeah, I was going to say, the book's all about Allied. Does their behavior even approach what Allied did to you?
Well, it's not that, because it hasn't been for 6 years and they haven't stolen my phone records and all this other kind of stuff. But there are
not to say they will.
There are some signs here already in terms of some very similar kind of behavior. Since they can't answer the substance, they attack the messenger, and they try to undermine the credibility. He was wrong once about New Century. David
has a book out.
This has a book out. David, whatever, he's on the television a lot. All the kind of stuff you had in there. And frankly, we saw the same thing in Allied in the sense. About a month or two after the speech I gave in 2002, the Wall Street Journal wrote a story. Holman Jenkins, he's a columnist, and he compared my speech to a mugging. And it was an ad hominem attack because they couldn't deal with the fact that I had good points on their accounting. And I don't think it's all that different from what we saw in the New York Times yesterday, unfortunately.
David, does your view on Lehman have anything to do with their ability to continue to do business in formerly lucrative areas like structured finance?
Yes, there is long-term problems here because Lehman was a fixed income shop. Their business mix is changing mostly because fixed income is going down because the business is disappearing and the other parts are kind of holding in there.
So you factor in future earnings power at Lehman Brothers. Do you have a number that you come to?
Well, it's hard to come by because you don't really know how they make their money. They have these very broad lines on their income statement, you know, principal transactions and so on and so forth. And you don't really know exactly how much is coming from securitization, which might not come back. You don't know how much is coming from the fact that their balance sheet used to be levered 30 or 40 times, and now they say it's going to come down a few turns from that. Frankly, I think it needs to come down a few more turns even than they're willing to admit before you get to a point where you have a sort of a reasonable capital structure, particularly given that there's a public interest now, which is since the taxpayers are bailing out the credit and backstopping the credit of Lehman, or at least that's the assumption in the market, there's a public interest in making sure that the balance sheet as a whole is not managed in too risky a fashion, and that should bring down leverage ratios across Wall Street.
Have they been able to walk you back from any charge you've made? Have they had a good response in your view to anything that you've...
Not a single thing that I've raised has there been an answer. You know, I raised the issue, there was this investment in KSK Energies, which they wrote up last quarter by $400 to $600 million. And when we asked the CFO about it, she invented a story where she said somebody else came in and a private investor before an IPO and invested at a big premium to where we were carrying it, and we valued it at a 30% discount to that. And we asked her, when we got into the more specifics and we did more research, we found that there was no private investor. This round did not happen, and now Lehman's story is they were anticipating. Well, she changed her story, absolutely for sure, and I mentioned this in my speech. Incidentally, if you want to see what I actually said, and it's important to do it because other people are mischaracterizing what I said, it's on our website. You can go to greenlightcapital.com. There's a link to it, and you can read all the way through.